So, as we alluded to before, the Meat Science team has been working in situ with supply chains right across Australia, and today we're going to get Thomas Foods International's perspective on that collaboration. David Rutley is going to join us. He's the lamb supply chain coordinator with Thomas Foods. Processes and Thomas Foods process between 15 and 20% of Australia's sheep and lambs, which is approximately 2.5% of global processing. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Okay, so David comes with a strong research background, having been based at the University of Adelaide before joining the TFI team. David's interested in all aspects of red meat supply chain, having worked in both industry, conducted research and the consumer perception of retail food service distribution, right back down the chain to breeding and genetics. So today, to give a processor's perspective of where we're at with lean meat yield and eating quality, David Rutley. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. So, yes, I've been asked to talk about... sorry, I'll stand away from those. I'm normally loud enough. Oh, righto, so I have to stand over here. That's right. To talk about abattoir technologies for the industry. So I'll just make sure I get the right button. So what I'll do, I'll discuss several types of technologies and several specific technologies. The guys here before me have done an excellent job, so we'll be revisiting a little bit of that. I'd like to talk about why certain ones are important and where are they important, and I'm pretty simple. I go back to demand and supply curves for that. We'll talk about consumption to conception, and I want everyone to start thinking about what is important. So I sort of think of them, there's engineering technologies. They're big fancy ones. There's regulatory technologies. You might not think of those as technologies, but they're very important to us. Measurement technologies, which Graham was talking about now. And information technologies. Sam's trying to tie it all together for us. So engineering technologies, these are the big ticket items. These are things like robots. Very fancy things. We've got some New Zealanders wandering over trying to sell us $1 million projects. There's another one MLA just mentioned the other day, high pressure processing. That's another several $1 million processing if we want to go down that path. All very good projects, tend to be focused on what we can do, how we can save money, be a bit more efficient within ourselves. Regulatory technologies, this is NLIS. We've all got our mob-based traceability. Is that going to stack up in the future? The Red Tractor program in England, if we want to supply Tesco, we need to do that. We have lots and lots of audits from various customers done because the Americans come out here and check out our processing facilities. Measurement technologies, Graham talked about those in details, the X-rays to estimate yields, impedance, that's the X-ray, well that's a CAT scanner, CT scanner, and we're looking to see if we can measure eating quality, IMF, with an impedance probe. We're not going to look at yield until we can control eating quality. That would be silly. Information technologies, electronic ear tags, RFIDs. Certainly in the stud industries, they're probably pretty well adopted now, but can we get the flow? We had questions before. How can we get all this data through the commercial sector and through the feedlot sector? Meat Standards Australia, obviously, I'm considering that information. That's starting to interpret the data. That's about developing indexes now for what we're measuring. Livestock Data Link is coming online. It's a matter of tying all this information together. The one that really interests me and I'm excited about is value chain. It's thinking. It's a different philosophy. It's how we think about it. Andrew Fern brought that out here 6 or 7 years ago now. And that's giving us a way of thinking about the consumer and where we fit into these things. So let's think about the effect of all of these different technologies. What do they mean to our supply chain? Or I'm going to talk about our value chain. So our simple little demand and supply curves, I used to call them supply and demand curves, but they're now demand and supply curves. It's a pretty simplistic way of thinking about what something's going to do. So our engineering technologies, they're basically going to reduce the processing costs, make things more efficient. We've just spent $30 million on a new beef boning room. We've got things in there to walk through the turnstiles to get in there. You can't just walk through a door. You have to stick your hands in the hand washer or else the turnstile won't work. That's a technology. It's not a fancy robot, but it's going to make our food safety and our shelf life longer and give us more options at the other end. Regulatory technologies. This is really important to us. It's all about market access. We supply 70 or 80 countries around the world. Food safety, the Chinas are coming here because we've got regulations in place to make our food safe. Measurement technologies, probably it's about eating quality and yield. It's about consumers, it's about customer satisfaction. It's about improving those things. Our information technologies, there's probably a bit of a function. There's a bit of grey, a bit of overlap here, but it's about also improving customer satisfaction as well as reducing waste. So they're the different styles and types of technologies, and I interpreted the speech today about how do we put these together and how do we approach the problems of which technologies to use to look at next. So this is our American consumer. This is where the value starts. This is the most important person in our value chain. So let's think about the market a bit more generally. We sell globally, not just to one consumer, not just domestically. So about 30% of our product goes to Australia. The other 70% goes to export. The biggest market there is the US. High value, high volume, a really good market. It's grown because we've adopted lots of these technologies. Middle East is high volume but is lower value, smaller carcasses. Europe is very high value but constrained by quotas. And China is the unknown at the moment and growing and changing rapidly. Oh. What did that do? That was the wrong one, sorry. So predicted by 2020 that China wants 0.1 to 0.3 million tonnes of Australian sheep and lamb. That's about 20 to 60% of our current production. That's a big number. What will happen? Don't know. So my job is to look at those markets and try to connect those to you guys. And so that's where we're going. Now we've got to look at what's coming through, what's on the land, and where have we been. So this was a graph presented 18 months ago by Sandy McEachran from Holmes and Sackett. And this looks at, they do a lot of benchmarking, hundreds, probably nearly 1,000 farms that they benchmark, look at their financial figures. And it's 1998 up to 2013, it's 15 years of data. And it's dollars on the y-axis here. The yellow columns are the cost of production actual for the year across their clients. And you can see that in 1998, cost of production was under $2. And sure, in 2013, more than doubled, it's over $4. That's per kilogram of carcass weight. So the red line here is the returns, price received, dollars per kilogram carcass weight. It's gone from just over $2 to just over $5. It hasn't doubled, but it's gone up more than the cost of production. To me, that, from what I learnt in first year economics at university, that's possibly unique in agricultural commodity production. that incomes have increased faster than costs over a long period. It's come down there in 2013, but last year, a lot of the time, the Eastern States Trade Lamb Indicator was at $6. Current price is at $5. It's probably pretty close to that mark there now. And those two lines seem to be diverging. I qualify that, that's perhaps the top 20 to 30% of producers. For the average producer, they might be parallel, which is still a pretty good situation. So Sandy McEachen asked, can it get any better than this? Is there one way for our industry to go? I'm not here because I think there's one way. I think if we get things right, we can stay there, we can manage it, and we can do a really good job. It's really exciting opportunities there. Lamb globally is a niche product. Americans eat 0.4 kilograms of lamb a year. So we're talking to people like the Vice President for the culinary section of the Marriotttville Hotels. I'd like to talk to him more. So this is the value chain as we see it, and this is how we think about it. Consumer is king. So this is the consumer. All these people are different customers down the line, and my job is to try to work out this feedback and pass it down. So, feedback, what's important? That depends who you're talking to. The consumer, the chef, the distributor, the processor, the producer or finisher, and you guys. Everyone has a different idea of what's important. We go through those. First thing for the consumer is food safety. It's not safe, it's not even on the plate. That's why China's coming here. After that is portion size and degree of doneness. That's what you look at first thing when you go to a restaurant. Then we worry about juiciness, tenderness and flavour. That's Meat Standards Australia, a really good grading system. Unfortunately, we've only got a systems approach to that now. Graham's trying to develop tools to be able to do it automated for 10 times the number of animals as cattle in the abattoir. We get down to the person that's got to cook it. They can wreck it, or they can do a really good job. Their concern is that it's a nice even thickness so that they can cook it evenly all the way through for you. pH affects how it's going to cook. They need to know how much connective tissue in it. Is it a shoulder cut? Should it be slow cooked? Is it a nice chop? Can we grill it and do it quickly? But they also have to understand what the consumer wants. The distributor, all they're really interested in is storage, shelf life, temperature, oxygen, packaging. That's what they're directly interested in, but they have to know what the chef wants and they have to know what the consumer wants. We'll keep going. The processors, we really want as much as we can get out of what you guys sell us. So that's saleable yield. But we also have to know what the distributor wants, what the chef wants, and what the consumer wants. Building a picture, the finisher, all they want is feed conversion efficiency and growth. Plus all of the above. Production, all they want, lambs on the ground is number one, growth is number two. But they have to know all of the above. Genetics, correlations and heritabilities, plus all of the above. Whoops, oh yeah, no, that's it. So, there's a lot there. I haven't even talked about what transporters want or what agents want, and they're important parts in our supply chain, our value chains. There's a bloody lot there. So what's important? What's actually important is that we meet our consumer or our customer's expectations, right? So if the customer's got an expectation, it's what they want, they'll come back. Or they won't come back because they might not expect something so nice. Wrong button. So what's the customers expect? Who can tell me in one word whether you're buying a biro, a car or a chop, what the customer expects? Satisfaction. I'm pretty simple. It's just simply the same next time. So if they go and buy a nice rack of lamb, they'll go back there because they expect the same next time. If they have a bad one, they won't go back there because they expect the same next time. So it's consistency, and consistency simply provides opportunity. That's repeat sales. That takes all the transaction costs out because we start to develop relationships. So it's pretty simple. That's how we think of it. There's a whole heap of technologies. I could put slides up there or videos of robots doing things. That's engineering technologies. They're big ticket items. We're looking at those. We're looking at x-ray machines. I'm working out the value of fat to us. I'm not going to go chasing fat until we can control eating quality. Engineering's important. There's lots of those things at Murray Bridge. We have producers through. We can show you that stuff. We're looking at regulatory types of technologies and tying these together. Measurement technologies, what Graham's doing. If we can't measure it, how can we control it? When we can measure it, we've got to use Sam to tie it all together. That's actually, I think, is the hard one. But I think we've got a good bloke to do it, you reckon, Sam? You can buy me a beer later. We have to think about the whole chain. The most important thing as a processor, yeah, we are the big boys. But Andrew Fern came out here in 2008 and talked about the paradox of power. When you're a little fish in a big pond, you can negotiate hard, you can be tough. Doesn't matter if you upset a few people, there's more fish in the sea. We process 15 to 20% of Australia's sheep and lambs, and if we're not playing the game with everyone, supply is our biggest problem, and we'll have to come back to you in 5 years' time. And will you want to supply our plants then? We've all got to work together. It's a whole chain approach, and we've got to make sure the consumer, who is king, who supplies the value, gets what they expect, and that's a good. So it's about the consumer, it's about consistency. Consistency of what? What is consistency? What things do we need to be targeting when we're talking about consistency? Who can answer that in one word? Everything. Simple, isn't it, Sam? So we have to juggle, we have to balance. We're not always the first adopters. Second's a good space to be. I like to see the other guys test it out for us. But we have to balance it. And, you know, we've just done our new lairage before we could do our new boning room. Before we did that, we did our sheep slaughter floor. And before that, we had to keep the EPA happy with our water treatment. So we have to do one thing at a time, and we have to prioritise those things. So we have to balance. And you guys have all been taught by the geneticists about balanced breeding objectives and selection indices and these sorts of things. We see exactly that. I'll just tell you a little chat that I had a couple of weeks ago with a poultry nutritionist talking to me about feed conversion efficiency and quoting me all the numbers under the sun. And what do you say? Sure, they've got much better feed conversion efficiency than lambs. There's only one response: the consumer. The consumer will tell them who's got the best product, and they'll pay the most for the best product. And we're there. And we need to stay there, and we have to have this whole thing tied together so that we can stay there. Harry met Sally. I'll have what she's having. That's what she's having. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yep. So questions from the floor? And perhaps while we're having questions, if I could ask the speakers in this last session too to come forward, and we'll sort of transition on into an open panel and spread the load. Probably get Hamish to come forward as well with those speakers. Yep.
Yeah, g'day David, it's Alan Pickett here. Look, I've asked you this question before, but I'm just wondering whether we're any closer. So the guys that have got electronic tags in their lambs, how long before you can actually utilise those tags and get some good information back to them?
Troy, I think we're 2 or 3 weeks away. Is that the story? Yeah, so no, we're getting on loan a little batch of 100 hooks to run Troy and Nettie's lambs through. I put my order in last week for 400 trial hooks. We're starting a trial with Thornby Feedlot. We're going to be tagging lambs this week for them to come out in 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it is. And so we're going to be doing a trial through Roseworthy, through Adelaide Uni. That's at the trial stage. We're trying to tie all this together. We're doing business cases to the directors to tie these things together. So that's where we are.
So, Dave, you put in a capital expense claim for 400 hooks. How many hooks do you run on the chain at Murray Bridge?
6,000 lambs a day overnight in the chiller and 4,000 mutton a day. We've probably, I don't know exactly, I haven't counted them, but a lot.
Okay, adds up to a lot.
400, the big thing is to keep them separate so I can get them back and use them next time.
So Dave mentioned he's pretty keen to keep your supply heading his way, and so we all know those from Victoria. There are actually 4 plants about to put in the tracking technology of some sort, whether it be RFID based or via ticketing. Can be done by tickets as well. So Dave's obviously watching that space as well. Yep. Other questions? One on the board. Oh, Luke, you meant to condense them down.
Transport with leading qualities. Well, there's a new guy that's just starting at Roseworthy. They've just employed a new professor of bioinformatics. And I've been talking to John Williams is his name. He's going to start in July. And I think there's an opportunity, and it'll be up to putting a business case to the board again, to develop a research collaboration so that we can start to measure individuals en masse. I mean, we do 1.5 million lambs a year, and that's 1.5 million cartons of lamb meat going out. And there's a lot of data to start tying together. We've got an optimum fat of around 10 millimetres. That's whether it's a 20 kilogram carcass or a 30 kilogram carcass. Unfortunately, at the extremes, you don't get too many 20 kilogram carcasses with 10 mils of fat, and 30 kilogram carcasses always have more than 10. So we've got a bit of work to start to try to tease all that out. So is there a correlation? I'm sure there's a correlation. Exactly what it is, Janelle might be able to look it up. I don't have the manual in front of me. We're working towards all that.
Yep. Okay. Other questions? Yep. Jeff?
David, Jeff Gale. If you're in a situation from the producer's area where you want them with RFID tags and you're taking contracts, why can't you buy the tags and send them out to them that you know how many lambs they're going to bring in?
That's a good question. Probably there's no reason. So, we're looking at all options. That has been discussed and is not off the table.
Yep. So it's days like this with questions like that start to make people think, and that's the fruit of those sorts of things. Yep.
Sorry, just the purpose of the feedlot trial. I've analysed feedlot cattle for a large feedlot in northern New South Wales. I feed 35,000 head of cattle a year. It's worth $10 a head to know how good the suppliers are. They started writing numbers on ear tags in 1991. Long before we had electronic IDs. So what's it worth to each sector of the value chain? The Victorians are doing a lot of work on pedigree matchmaker and technologies for commercial producers. If we can work out what it's worth at that part of the supply chain, what it's worth in the finishing sector, what it's worth as a process, what it's worth for the whole value chain put together, perhaps not for one sector, but perhaps across the value chain, we can justify it now.
Yep. Graham, did you have a question? Yep.
Bruce, there was a comment regarding that last question that was up there, which with respect to pre-slaughter stress and the link with meat quality. not just shear force. It does impact, so stress and poor nutrition can lead to dark cutting, and so that's a high ultimate pH. It has small impacts on palatability and shear force, but big impacts on meat colour stability at retail, and also the keeping quality of the meat goes off quicker. So it has a big effect, and it's worth a lot of money. And at the moment, in lamb, there's no technology to measure on individual carcasses pH and dark cutting. So therefore, it's not measured, which is what's stopping Dave doing anything about it at TFI.
So I could mention with the beef cattle and dark cutting, in 2010 I had an honours student at a small abattoir doing animal behaviour studies and looking at the relationship between animal behaviour, stress, transport distance, unloading time and pH as measured according to MSA. Adelaide Uni is repeating that study this year down at Narracourt. Just an honours presentation this afternoon that I heard before I came here on that study. So this work is being done, but we can't do it in lambs because we don't have pH in every lamb. Sorry, more questions?
Yeah, thank you, Joe here, David. You've half answered my question before I asked it, but I've experienced taking rams around, treating them differently with products that are on the market. They're holding their weight or losing weight, and I was going to ask you, have you done much work on that? And you've just said, yes, you are.
I've done bits and pieces in past life. Right at the moment, I'm not. I did do a trial with an electrolyte in a feedlot 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't find any difference in that trial, but that was only 2 pens with 50 head per pen, so a very small trial. And various things we pulled out of feedlotting on a commercial basis shortly after that, so we didn't continue to check it out.
Thank you.
Yep, there was another question down the back here. Yep.
David, all day, all afternoon, we've been talking about lean meat yield. It was good to hear you say we have a requirement for fat.
We have
you have a requirement for a certain amount of fat, and my feeling is that if we keep pushing lean meat yield, suddenly we lose sight of that requirement for a certain amount of fat on the product.
So I was suggesting before, I wrote a slide the other day that was probably a little bit controversial, and I softened it today, but if you really want lean meat yield, there's other industries that you can look at, and you're welcome to enter. So that's probably enough. No offence meant.